Welcome to my Days of Our Lives official channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Stefan tries to murder Harris. Stefan arrived at Salem Hospital disguised as a doctor. Harris was sleeping in his room. Stefan approached the door with a mask on as Goldman stood watch in the hallway. "Thank God you're here. Been jonesing for a cappuccino. I'll be back in a jiffy. You want anything?" Mr. Goldman asked. Stefan shook his head, "No." Goldman slowly walked past Stefan, patting him on the shoulder. Harris's eyes widened when he realized Goldman worked for Clyde. Stefan strolled inside Harris's room and reflected about when he had shot Harris. Stefan murmured, "Better luck this time," as he retrieved the syringe from his lab coat pocket. Stefan proceeded to insert the contents of the syringe into Harris's fore. Harris grabbed his wrist and stopped him. "Not so fast," Harris replied. Stefan tried to tear his arm away, but Harris held firm. "You're not going anywhere, pal," Harris replied. Harris stumbled out of bed as Stefan lunged for the exit. Harris drew Stefan into a choke hold. "Stefan," Harris hissed. "You know I had no choice in this," Stefan remarked. "We all have choices," Harris responded. Stefan asked Harris what he wanted. "You work for me, Demara. You're going to take the fall for this, and you're going to help me take Clyde Weston down," she stated. Harris informed Stefan that he may prosecute him with attempted murder of a police officer. "Do you know what kind of time you're going to freaking serve?" was the reply. Harris pushed Stefan across the room. "You ready to play ball?" Harris inquired. Stefan nodded in agreement. Harris informed Stefan that he would be in touch. Stefan raced out of the room. Harris coughed and strained to get back into bed. Goldman returned while Harris lay on his bed, eyes closed. When Harris moved, Goldman gasped. "What the?" Goldman asked. Harris looked over. "Goldman. It's you," Harris announced. Goldman fumbled to pull her revolver from the holster, but when a nurse entered the room, she froze. Goldman glared at Harris before fleeing the room. At Black Patch, Steve and John studied Tripp and Wendy's hostage footage. "The kidnappers sure as hell knew how to disengage their phones," Steve said with a sigh. Steve noted that Tripp and Wendy's last known location was outside the town square, and he speculated that the abductor may have forced Wendy to use her technological knowledge to mask his tracks. John's phone rang. Brady phoned John from Tate's new halfway house in Salem. "You're on the visitors list, so do you think you can make it?" Brady asked. "Do you think so?" John began to ask Steve if he could leave to see Tate, but before he could continue, Steve insisted that John leave. "I'll keep working at this until you get back," Steve went on to say. John promised they'd find Tripp. After John had left, Constantine entered the office. "I thought he would never leave," Constantine stated. "You again?" Steve mumbled. Constantine offered Steve pastries, but he refused. "I don't have time for this," Steve grumbled. Constantine explained that the pastries would remind Steve of his time in Aria, Greece. As he leaned forward, Constantine discussed his daughter's fondness for baklava. "Don't you ever shut up?" Steve exclaimed. Steve claimed that he was preoccupied with a case and did not have time to entertain Constantine. "So, is your son still missing?" Constantine inquired. "What's it to you?" Steve inquired. Constantine expressed empathy for Steve's pain and rage. Pining for answers that remain excruciatingly elusive, Constantine wrote. Constantine claimed that his pain affected him at all times of day. "I miss my Katharina more as time passes, not less," Constantine stated. Constantine stated that Katharina was the one positive thing he had done in his life. "Do you feel that way about your children, Mr. Johnson?" Constantine asked. Steve stated that his children mean everything to him. With a nod, Constantine stated that Steve should appreciate how devastating the loss of his daughter had been for him. "How could I not?" Steve replied. Constantine said he appreciated Steve's empathy. Steve nodded and inquired if Constantine planned to blame him for Katharina's death. "I am not trying to do anything, I am simply sharing how her death haunts me," Constantine remarked. Steve shook his head and became teary-eyed. Nobody was intended to die that day. It was an accident. A tragic accident, Steve acknowledged. "Which you witnessed?" Constantine asked Steve if he was admitting that he had been present when the pawn shot Katharina in the head. Steve shook his head no. "Not directly," Steve said. "Surely, a confession would help you to relieve the guilt," Constantine said. "Tell me more, please. For both of our sakes. We both need peace of mind," Constantine pleaded. Steve choked back his emotions, and Constantine urged him to unburden himself. "We were different people then. But, yeah, I was Victor's pawn handler. He summoned me away to give me some instructions. And when I returned, there found a young girl laying dead. That image has troubled me for a long time. I didn't know who she was," Steve remarked. "But you do now," Constantine said. Steve nodded. "And where was the pawn when you returned?" Constantine inquired. "He was there. He was clutching a gun. And someone else was lying close to the girl, down on the ground, and I couldn't see their face. But I knew it was you," Steve said. Constantine's face twisted up in fury. "Where's the bastard that killed my Katharina? I am going to choke him out!" Constantine yelled. Steve protested that Constantine wasn't after John. "Whatever John did was out of his control," Steve said. "But you don't deny he was the pawn?" Constantine asked. Steve explained that Stefano had transformed John into the pawn against John's will. "And Stefano is no longer with us. Victor is no exception. So, if it makes you feel better, go spit on their graves, but keep John out of it." Steve shouted, "He has suffered enough." "Has he suffered?" "I've suffered. And now I want you both to suffer like I have." When Steve asked Constantine what he meant, he replied, "Your missing son may still be alive. But my daughter has died. And I shall get justice," Constantine said, storming out of the office. Brady and Teresa arrived at the halfway house and were greeted by the receptionist. "You are on the list, Ms. Donovan, so you can just head on into the room," the receptionist said. Brady was surprised and asked if he was not allowed inside. The receptionist confirmed that Brady did not have Tate's permission to go inside. Teresa offered to speak with Tate on Brady's behalf, but he shook his head no. "I'll be here if you need me," Brady said. Teresa went inside. When John arrived in the halfway home waiting room, Brady revealed that Teresa was with Tate. "Dad, he didn't put me on the list," Brady admitted. John reassured Brady not to worry, saying, "I have seen you and your boy together. Let me tell you, the link is strong," John remarked. He told Brady to be patient. When Teresa entered the visitor's room, she jumped into Tate's arms, saying, "It's great to see you." "You know your dad's here," Teresa said. Tate requested Teresa not to guilt trip him. "Do not try to force me to see Dad today," before everything happened. Tate agreed that treatment had transformed his life. "It brought up how Dad wasn't there for me when I was growing up," Tate added. Teresa admitted that she had made the decision to relocate to California. "I kept you from your father," Teresa stated. Tate told her that he didn't trust her. With a sigh, Teresa admitted that she had gotten custody of Tate by inventing a story that implicated Brady in a murder. "That's how I was able to take you to California. So, my argument is that the man you refuse to see, I have injured him far more than he has hurt you or me. Your father loves you." Tate was taken aback and shook his head in amazement as Teresa added, "He always has, and he always will." "Brady was kind and supportive even after everything that I have done to him," Teresa said as she told Tate that she had fallen off the wagon and Brady had helped her recover from her slip. Your father, Brady Black, needs you in his life. Tate grabbed his grandfather as John greeted them. And you need him, Teresa added. Your mom is right. Your father needs you because he adores you. What about your mother here? She just took a significant risk by giving you the truth. That was courageous of her. Do you know why she did that? Because she felt confident in your love for her and believed she wouldn't lose you. Do you know what we call it? Tate, I love you unconditionally. And that is what your mother and father intend for you. That is what your grandparents have for you. Always, John replied. Teresa informed Tate that Brady hoped Tate would consent to visit him. You know, I just located my long-lost father, your great-grandfather. Timothy is a wonderful-spirited man that I lost out on spending so many years with. And neither of us would ever get those years back. I'm simply saying that I don't want you to look back one day and regret the time you missed with your father. But it's your decision, John said. As Brady rubbed his face in frustration, John exited the visitor's room and informed the receptionist that Tate wanted to see his father. John hugged Brady, and Brady thanked him. John asked Brady to call him later. You got yourself a good kid in there, John said. Brady nodded in agreement. When Brady entered the visitor's room, Tate greeted him and Teresa stepped outside to make a phone call. It's good to see you, Tate said, and it's good to see you, too. Brady said, look, man, I don't know what grandfather said to you, and Tate stated that Teresa had told him the truth regarding the custody dispute. As Brady stared in surprise, Teresa reappeared. Did you tell him? Brady stammered. It was time Tate knew the truth, Teresa remarked. Brady groaned. I really don't know what to say, he whispered. I'm sorry, Dad, Tate replied. Brady emphasized that Tate had nothing to apologize for. And thank you for telling the truth. I'm grateful, Brady told Teresa. Brady informed Tate that he loved Tate. And your mom and I will always be there for you, okay? Brady added. Tate nodded yes as Brady drew him into a hug. Brady mouthed thank you to Teresa. We still have a lot to catch up on, don't we? Tate turned to Teresa with a grin and said, thank you for opening up to me, really, for having the courage to tell me the truth about you and Dad. I'm so glad I did. Brady and Tate nodded and joked about the sports they had missed out on. Seeing you both laughing together makes me so happy, Teresa stated. When John returned to the Black Patch office, he asked Steve for an update on the case. Distracted, Steve pulled open the laptop and gave John the coordinates of Tripp's last known location before his disappearance. We're already making progress, John replied. Nicole presented lunch to Holly at the DiMera home. So, I was wrong before, wasn't I? It's far over New Year's Eve, right? You haven't let me see my phone or watch the news, Holly inquired. Nicole explained that it was normal for people who had slipped into a coma to resume where they had left off before losing consciousness. Did you say I was in an Italian hospital? I just can't wrap my head around that. Mom, what are you not telling me? Holly inquired. Nicole averted her gaze, unsure how to respond. So, how are we doing? EJ asked as he walked into the bedroom. Nicole explained that Sarah had advised Holly to take small walks to regain her strength. After being in bed for so long, we mustn't let the muscles atrophy, EJ said. Holly asked how long she had been in bed. Nicole told her not to worry. EJ eased Holly out of bed, and they walked across the room to seat her at the table for lunch. Holly made a face. It's chicken broth and smashed bananas with a pinch of cinnamon, Nicole remarked. Someone pass me my phone. I'm going to order a burger from Buddy's, Holly remarked. Nicole explained that they needed to gradually reintroduce food into Holly's system. As Nicole and Holly argued about the food, EJ grinned and said he missed the mother-daughter relationship. After Holly finished her meal, she prodded Nicole for an explanation. You had opioid-laced drugs in your system, EJ stated. Holly shouted, believe me, we are going to get to the bottom of what happened. EJ assured her that they were aware she did not use drugs. But whatever occurred, it was an overdose, and your heart stopped multiple times, EJ stated. Holly nearly died before falling into the coma. It happened on New Year's Eve, Nicole added. Nicole questioned Holly whether she remembered that night. Holly furrowed her brow and shook her head. Just the sound of fireworks, Holly answered. EJ urged Holly to recall that night. Nicole asked Holly where she got the drugs. Did Tate give those to you? EJ inquired. I don't know. I do not recall taking any medicines. So, someone must have provided them to me, Holly stated. Holly suggested that the narcotics could have been placed into her drink. Is it not Tate? Is there no one? Nicole inquired, and Holly said that she was tired and wanted to relax. With a nod, EJ and Nicole put Holly back into her bed. Holly exhaled in relief as EJ and Nicole exited the room, recalling her kiss with Tate on New Year's Eve. Tate, she mumbled.